Today I built this talk mostly as an introduction to topical and thematic collecting for people who have never considered a topical or thematic collection. But also, I think if you already are a topical or thematic collector, you may learn some things about things that you can collect beyond stamps. Because I think everybody starts with stamps. That's how I got started. It's a stamp collecting hobby. But there's, especially in topical and thematic collecting, there's so much more that you can include in a collection that I think will really enrich your collection and your enjoyment of your collection. So let's get started. So this is just a brief outline of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm just going to give an overview of what exactly is topical or thematic collecting versus more traditional collecting. Just give some tips about what to think about, things to consider when you're building a topical collection. And then, as I mentioned, show you some examples from my own collections of things that you can include that are not just stamps. So there's lots of other philatelic material that's very collectible and can be very on topic for your collection. And then I'm going to just explain the difference between topical and thematic. Often people use these terms interchangeably, but there's actually a bit of a difference. And at the end, I'll just show how topical and then a thematic collection can lead very naturally into storytelling as you build your collection. And we'll see how that naturally evolves. So, a traditional collection, and many of us may, and myself included, started out as a sort of more traditional collector. People focus on the philatelic aspects of the material. So, for example, the country that produced the stamp, how the stamp was produced, how it was used, different rates, routes, these are all the different aspects of philately. And usually these collections are organized according to the philatelic aspects. So by the country of issue, by, where the mail was going, and so on. The collection may include stamps, postmarks, postal stationery, postal history, the whole wide world of philately. So in contrast to these sort of traditional ways of collecting, a topical or a thematic collection focuses on the images or the subject on the stamps or the other philatelic material. So rather than on the philatelic aspects, on the topic, on the images or the subject that is depicted on the stamp or postmark, etc. And your collection is usually, instead of being organized according to the philatelic aspects, it's organized according to the topic or theme and the, sub themes within the larger theme. But similar to traditional collecting, you can collect the whole wide world of philately, and I'll show you some examples during this talk. So not just stamps, but postmarks, postal stationery, postal history, basically anything that you can collect in traditional philately, you could potentially include in a topical or a thematic collection. So that makes it exciting, right? You can collect a the whole wide world of philately, and unlike, for example, a country collection where you have an album and you're filling the spaces and there's sort of a finite definition to a, so-called complete collection, the scope of a topical or thematic collection is really unlimited. It's really only limited by your imagination. You decide what you want to include or what you don't want to include, and every collection is unique. If you take two people that collect the same topic, their collections are not going to be the same. So that makes it a very wonderful and unique way to collect, and you can tailor it however you want to your own personal taste. So like I said, the subject can be as broad or as narrow as you like. Some examples of common topicals that people like to collect. So flowers is a very popular topical. There's lots and lots of stamps depicting flowers. So you can make it very broad and collect all flowers on stamps, or you can narrow it down and, for example, only collect orchids on stamps. Similarly, birds is a very, very popular topical. So you can collect the whole wide world of birds, many, many thousands, tens of thousands, if not more, of stamps. Or, you can restrict it to certain species of birds, like loons, for example, or maybe owls. I have a friend who collects not just falcons, but specifically peregrine falcons. So, you can narrow it down and be as specific as you like. You may define it based on, birds of prey. So I know some people who collect birds of prey. So it's not just one species, but a sort of class of birds. So you can do whatever you like. When you're choosing a topic, people tend to pick something that they know. So something maybe related to their job. If you work if you're an engineer, I have a friend in Brazil who collects bridges on stamps. So, and that's related to his day job. Tunnels on stamps, trains on stamps. You may have other hobbies like gardening or birding or sailing. So you may collect stamps that's related to your other hobbies. Places you've lived or places that you've visited, a favorite food, a sport that you like to participate in, a favorite author or an artist, or somewhere, a special holiday like Christmas, Christmas stamps, Easter stamps. So there's really no limit to what you can collect, really anything that tickles your fancy. So for myself, as Suzanne mentioned, I'm in my day job, I'm a hematologist. So I'm a physician that treats patients who have blood disorders, and I do leukemia research. So, and I've been a stamp collector for a long time, since I was a kid. But, I really only took up topical collecting maybe about 10 or 12 years ago when I joined a stamp club, and I saw that there were other collectors that had sort of topical collections. So I thought, oh, I'd like to try this. So I thought about what I'd like to collect, and I decided to pick a topic that was related to what I do in my work. Now, I do leukemia research. There's not a lot of stamps on leukemia. I did take a look at that, but there didn't seem to be a lot of stuff to collect there. But what I ultimately decided to collect was stamps related to blood donation and blood transfusion. And there were a couple of reasons why I picked this. First of all, it's a topic that's relevant to every country in the world. So there have been lots of stamp issues by many different countries related to blood donation and blood transfusion. And at the time when I started out, there were just under, I think, about 200 stamp issues. So to me, it seemed like a very, manageable number that would be fairly easy to collect, and not like a huge topic like Red Cross, for example, which is a much larger topic. So I set out to find stamps related to blood donation. So this is the very first stamp that was issued related to blood donation. It was issued by Hungary in 1942. It was a part of a set of 4 stamps that was promoting the Red Cross, and this one depicts a blood donor. Veritas means blood donation. So, the other nice thing about this topic was that it didn't, the first stamp was in 1942. So to me, it didn't, it wasn't going to be super expensive to find these stamps. Wasn't going to have to go back into sort of really classic, expensive stamps. And so I started searching online, on eBay, on Del Camp, and, started to find all these different stamps related to blood donation. And you can see there's many different aspects of blood donation. These are just a few examples from countries around the world that show different aspects of donating blood. But, as I was, okay, I'll talk a little bit more about the variety of things, but maybe before I get into that, I'll just explain or just give some tips about, when you're looking for stamps, things to consider. So this is not, again, there's no rules about how to collect a topic, but just things to think about when you're looking for stamps for your collection. So the first point to note is that not all the stamps in a set may be relevant to your topic. So for me, when I was looking for stamps related to blood donation, I would come across a set like this, for example. So this is from Ethiopia. It was a set issued for the 75th anniversary of the Ethiopian Red Cross Society. And it's a set of 4 stamps, but really only one stamp was related specifically to blood donation. But, when you're buying mint stamp sets, usually you have to buy the whole set. Knowing that I had to buy the whole set to get this one stamp that was related to my topic. Again, similarly, this is a stamp set that in the UK you may be familiar with. So it was a stamp set issued in 1998 for the 50th anniversary of the National Health Service. And again, only one stamp here, the 20p stamp, was specifically related to blood donation. But, I bought the whole set. It was actually health related, so it kind of goes in my broader collection of medical philately anyway. But there was only the one stamp that was related to my topic. But So just to keep that in mind. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that you may have so this is along similarly along that point. So here's a set from Jersey, for example, and if you're a bird collector, it's a wildlife set. Six of the stamps, there's six stamps in the set, and only three of them are depicting birds. So here, you have to buy the whole set to get the three bird stamps. So you may, if you're only collecting birds, maybe you buy the set and you swap the other ones with someone who's collecting the animals, and you don't want the birds and they don't want the birds because they're not, or you want the birds, but they don't want the birds. Anyway, you can swap or maybe even sell them. Even if you buy, if you're a bird stamp collector and you buy a whole set of bird stamps, you have to think about, okay, am I going to keep the set together, or should I organize the set in my albums by species, right? So should I put if I have a whole bunch of bird stamps, in sets or singles, should I take all the peacock stamps out of those sets and keep them together, and all the swan stamps and keep them together, or should I keep all the stamps together in my album? So, again, there's no rule. You can do whatever you prefer, but these are just some of the things to think about. I have a friend who collects bird stamps, and he takes the sets apart and he keeps all the species together. So, and you can organize it in albums, or on your pages. You can write them up, and you can individualize your collection. So what I started to say before, as I was looking for stamps related to my topic, blood donation, I would go on Del Camp or eBay and I would search for blood donation. And so a lot of stamps came up, but I started to see other things that were also related to blood donation. So for example, you'll find meter stamps. So this on the right-hand side here, this part is the actual stamp with the town mark and the franking. But meters often have a slogan that's associated with them to promote, whatever the company is that is using that meter, they want to promote their product or their mission. And so this is a meter from the Northern Ireland Blood Transfusion Service, and they have a nice slogan here with a pelican, which is the symbol of their service. You can't get blood from a stone, neither can we. So they're trying to promote blood donors. Here's a nice one from Belgium that has a nice pictorial slogan of two people with the ABO blood groups here. So again, promoting blood donation. So, something a little different. I didn't really know much about these when I started collecting, because I had only really just been a country stamp collector, and I had never collected anything other than stamps. So I started to see these, also pictorial postmarks. So this is a nice postmark from Italy promoting a mobile blood donor service. So it's a bus that would go from town to town, small towns that didn't have a permanent blood donor service or blood donor clinic, and people could donate blood inside this traveling clinic. And then you can even get machine slogans. So these are, the pictorial postmarks are usually applied by hand, but these are letters that are machine sorted, and the machine cancellations often will have slogans too. So this is one from the Trieste territory in the Allied military government after the Second World War that promotes blood donation to the blood bank. So I started to find these and I started to collect them. I thought, these are interesting. I'll start to collect them. Like I said, I didn't know much about them, but as I collected them, I got, I read and I tried to find stuff online, and I joined an online stamp forum and got some information there. So I started to learn about these. So, you can kind of expand your horizons that way. Also started collecting postal stationery. So postal stationery are, envelopes or cards that are produced by postal administrations with a pre-printed stamp or indicium on them. This one is from Bulgaria, and it depicts a woman carrying a child, and there's a text there that says citizens become blood donors. This particular one was mailed through a military post office, because that's a military post marking. This is a postcard. So this one's an envelope. This is a postcard from Romania as part of a set of 6 postal stationery cards. So again, the pre-printed indicium, and this whole set of 6 was promoting blood donation. So this is just one example. The text there says giving blood is an act of high patriotism. And the other 5 cards in the set, promote different aspects of blood donation. So these were really cool too. And I started to collect these as well. You can also find advertising that may be related to your topic. So Belgium produced what are called pub labels. So they were basically advertising that was printed on these postal stationery cards, and the income from the ads was used for social services. So the cards still cost the same, but because there was advertising, they had income. And you can find these cards basically on any topic that you can think of. So this particular one has again, the pelican symbol of the blood donor service and is promoting blood donation. This one is from Japan. It's called an eco card. So in this case, the ad is actually subsidizing the cost of the card. So the face value of the card here is 50 yen, and these cards would be, for example, sold for 45 yen because they're partially subsidized by the ad. And this shows a patient who's hooked up to a pheresis machine. So he may be donating platelets or donating plasma. So again, something very relevant for my collection.
There are more Virtual Stampex talks coming to YouTube. Subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss out.
So like I said, when you're building a topical collection, look beyond stamps. You can really build a very interesting collection and look for all these other sort of related things to your topic. So you can also find advertising on stamp tabs. So this is pretty common in like France, Belgium. So this is an example of a stamp, and on the tab, it's advertising this product beer. And it says here for anemias. So, it's promoting this product as a treatment for anemia. So, it's not really directly blood donation. Is this something that, would you consider this as something that belongs in a topical collection on blood donation? So here's where we get into the difference between a topical collection and a thematic collection. So a topical collection is really a collection where every item in the collection, be it a stamp, postmark, whatever, postal stationery, but every item depicts your topic. So has a picture of whatever it is you're collecting. So I consider this as, this type of collection would be kind of like akin to an illustrated catalog, where you're flipping through the catalog and every picture that you see in the catalog, if you're collecting butterflies, everything has a picture of a butterfly on it. A thematic collection, on the other hand, includes not only items that depict your topic, but also items that depict a related aspect of your topic. So if you were collecting butterflies, for example, and this is just, I went online and I found these examples of butterfly books. But if you were to take an illustrated storybook about butterflies, it would talk about their beauty, maybe their life cycle, their importance to plant life, the kind of flowers that attract butterflies, how they pollinate, how their migration routes. And so all these other related storylines to butterflies, you can collect stamps or other philatelic material that depict, aspects of these other storylines, but may not necessarily have a picture of a butterfly on them. So this is the difference where, between thematic and topical. Where thematic, you're now starting to get into more of the story and not just looking for things that just have a picture of your topic. So in this respect, in this context, then for sure, this stamp with the tab promoting a product for treating anemia, for sure, this could be, incorporated into a collection on blood donation and blood transfusion, because why do we need blood? It's for patients who have anemia. So this would be a treatment for anemia. So it's part of that story about the medical need for blood and why we have this need for blood donors and how the blood is used. So it's part of the larger story around blood donation. So for sure, it can, be added to a thematic collection about blood donation. So, with those definitions in mind, I wanted to kind of give some examples using items from another one of my medical philately collections. So, when the pandemic started, we were all stuck at home and I was looking for something to do. And, I have an interest in medical philately, obviously, because of my background in medicine. And so I started collecting stamps and other material related to the pandemic, related to COVID-19. So if you were building just a COVID-19 topical collection, what that would mean is that you're limiting your collection to items, stamps, and other items that depict the COVID-19 virus on it, right? So the very first stamp that was issued by Iran fairly early in the pandemic in March of 2020, and it it has a picture of the coronavirus. This was before, or maybe just shortly after, the WHO gave the virus its official name. So it doesn't actually say COVID-19 on there, but clearly the virus is depicted on there. This is a stamp from a German private mail company. So in Germany, there's many of these private mail companies that work sort of in cooperation with Deutsche Post to deliver mail either regionally, or some of them even deliver mail internationally. But this is a stamp from one of these private companies, Ulster Post, that has a very nice graphical depiction of the coronavirus. This is a picture postmark. So this was issued by Croatia. The date on this postmark that was issued is the 30th of April. They actually were initially intending to issue this in March, at the end of March, but there was a very large earthquake that happened, I think just a few days before the issue date, that heavily damaged the post office where the postmark was going to be issued. So they ended up delaying it by about a month, and they issued it from a different post office. You can see the different postal code. So, there's an interesting story behind this, right? But this postmark has a nice depiction of the virus as well. This is a stamp issue from Serbia they have, I don't know if it's annual or biannual, but there's a contest called Joy of Europe, which is basically an art contest for youth. And the images, the winning art that they selected in 2020 all had all depicted children and other scenes that had very much an emotional connection to the pandemic and the feelings that people were going, the sort of emotions and other things that people were going through, the isolation, the uncertainty and so on. So the stamps themselves, although, their art and stuff was kind of related to the pandemic, there was no direct depiction of the coronavirus in any of the stamps, maybe in one of the stamps, but certainly not in all of the stamps on the sheet. But they included a depiction of the coronavirus. And I don't know if this was one of the art things that was drawn by one of the contestants, one of the entrants. So there's a nice depiction of a coronavirus on the selvage of the stamp sheet. So, not on the stamp itself, but, you can collect this little corner block and that's got a depiction of the coronavirus. This is an aerogram that was issued by Vatican City with a depiction of the coronavirus and a vaccine, presumably, that's going to kill the coronavirus. So, all of these things, and, it's not just postage stamps here, right? But there's a variety of things that you can collect in a COVID-19 topical collection that would, that all depict have some depiction of the coronavirus on them. So if you wanted to expand it to a thematic collection, there were certainly many, many issues that depicted other aspects of the pandemic through the 2-3 years that we were, before we sort of emerged from the other side of the pandemic. So I'll start with just some stamps. So these are all postage stamps, but they all depict different aspects of the pandemic, and none of them have a picture of the coronavirus. So these would not be technically part of a topical collection, but they certainly belong in a thematic collection on COVID-19. So this is one of my favorite stamps from French Polynesia that has these two ladies in their colorful dresses with matching face masks, and it's depicting social distancing, and they're measuring how far you should socially distance or physically distance by laying down 6 coconuts on the ground between them. So, it was one way to measure how far apart you should sit. This is part of a set of 6 issued by Singapore once kids were starting to go back to school, and it was sort of a kid-friendly set that was promoting different ways that people could stay safe, so washing your hands, covering your mouth when you cough and things like that. So this is just one example, wash your hands. This was an ATM issued by Israel that depicts one of the drive-through testing. So people would drive up in their cars and they could get COVID-19 test through the window. Belgium issued a stamp depicting the social isolation that people were feeling from the physical distancing that ended up being fairly prolonged during the pandemic. Austria Post always has these interesting and unusual stamps that they make from different materials. And so they made a stamp. This was one of 3 stamps they issued during the pandemic, but this particular one was made from the material that they used to make face masks. And it was embroidered and, issued in the shape of a face mask with these embroidered ear loops. So you can include that in a collection of unusual stamps as well. France issued a set of 12 stamps promoting essential workers. So this is just one of them, grocery workers that kept the food supply chain going. And then, of course, towards the end of the pandemic, vaccination stamps issued promoting vaccination. So this is an example from Peru. So these are all different aspects of the pandemic that are found on stamps, but then you can look beyond stamps to other material too. So these are just a few examples. You can find slogans on machine cancels on the left here. This one is from Australia with thumbs up to vaccination. And then this is a meter stamp from Germany. I just like this one because it's a little bit of a pun. So in German, Impfen means vaccination. So they have Impf Frankfurt, right, promoting vaccination in the city of Frankfurt. These are a couple of examples of pictorial postmarks from Taiwan. This one has a picture of the Omicron variant. This one actually has the little COVID-19 rapid test. So, you can find basically any aspect of the pandemic, you can find some kind of philatelic item that has some depiction of it. Several postal administrations issued or distributed free postcards to try and promote connection and people writing letters and cards to each other. So this is an example from Canada. One of 6 cards that were produced with English first and French second. And then there was another set with the same messages, but French first, English second, that they distributed to French-speaking areas. And every household got one. It was random which one you got, but you could separate the postcard, and then it was postage paid within Canada, and you could mail it, write a message to a friend and send your postcard. Postal history, lots of really interesting postal history that you could really collect almost in real time, right? We think of postal history as sort of, older material, but there was lots of really interesting postal history going on because of disruptions in travel. A lot of, flights were canceled, and so postal services weren't available among many countries. And so there were a lot of, return to sender marks that were related to the pandemic. I particularly like this one with the pointing hand. This one is from Taiwan, where mail service was suspended to Canada. So this one was returned to the sender. China, for a long time, was disinfecting mail, and they would slap a sticker on the envelope to indicate that the mail had been disinfected. With a message to, be careful and sanitize the contents when you opened your letter. And then this one, a friend of mine in Thailand received this, where he was not getting mail for a long time, and then, got a whole bunch of mail all at once, and they were all stamped with this hand stamp, delivery delayed, COVID-19, because the post office had kept the mail kind of in quarantine for a few weeks before they delivered it to the addressee. So lots of really interesting stuff to collect through the pandemic. And then you can even find stuff like design errors. So this was a stamp issued by Poland to promote vaccination, right? It shows a woman with her, kind of the showing strength with her flexing her biceps, and the Band-Aid is on her biceps. But of course, that's not the muscle where we usually get vaccinated, right? We usually get vaccinated in the deltoid muscle, as you can see from this pictorial postmark from Korea and this stamp from India. So, it's an interesting, you kind of see what they were trying to do, but it's an interesting sort of design error that you can comment on when you're telling the story of the pandemic. So, to me, when you I think most people probably start out as sort of topical collectors, right? You start looking for stamps and other things that are all have pictures of whatever topic you decide to collect. But then maybe, you start to collect these other sort of side stories. And as you organize your collection this way, it sort of naturally organizes itself into a story, and you can start to build a story, and that kind of sort of, so it sort of leads naturally into storytelling and how you can set out your pages for your album, or if you want to take that next step, share that story with other collectors and put up an exhibit, or so that's how I kind of got started with my blood donation collection. But so just as an example, for all the things that I've shown you from my COVID-19 collection, you can start to see the story emerging, right? And at the beginning, I had, I gave a talk on this for the American Topical Association. If you go to their website, you can find my talk, and I've done there might be some other ones too that I did for my local stamp club, but I organized my talk for the American Topical Association by the story rather than showing different kinds of material. I told the story and showed the material that illustrated the story. So the chapters sort of naturally evolved from, first identifying the coronavirus, and then the public health measures that were implemented to control the pandemic, right? Hand washing, face masks, social distancing, and how that disrupted normal life, leading to social isolation and things that were done to try and overcome that isolation. Lots of stamps issued sort of promoting solidarity and, we're going to be strong, we're going to be resilient, we're going to get through it. Like that stamp set from France showing all the essential workers, including postal, letter carriers, people that kept the supply chain going, of course, all the healthcare workers that treated people. And then eventually, we got the vaccines, we got other treatments that reduced mortality and helped us get back to a sort of new normal. But, we're not completely back to where we were before the pandemic. So there are certain things that have changed. So there's all these things that you can explore. And then, at the end, there's memorials that have been made to healthcare workers and monuments to the people that died in the pandemic, and the lessons that we've learned on how to manage potential future pandemics. So there's a wonderful story here. I have all this material. I haven't yet found the time to put together an exhibit, but I am planning to at some point. And there's a very sort of natural story that's come out of my collecting all this material over the last few years. So, again, this is like sort of the natural evolution of a thematic collector. I think first, the first thing is you decide on what topic you're going to collect using all the cues that I mentioned, right? Something related to other aspects of your life. And then as you start to collect, start with the stamps, but then you may start to find other things that are attractive and related to your topic, and you may want to start including those in your topic, and then start to include other aspects of the story. And as you organize that material, it very naturally leads into storytelling. And so, thematic, this goes back to the difference between sort of traditional and topical or thematic, right? So the same differences that apply here to your collection also apply to how you would exhibit a topical or a thematic collection, right? So instead of focusing the story in the exhibit on the philatelic aspects, right, how the stamps were produced and the usages and the rates and so on, your story is actually a non-philatelic story that's related to the images or the subjects that's on your material, and you're just using your material to illustrate that story. So it's a non-philatelic story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? It should be just like a children's book or any other good storybook that you pick up and you read, and there's an introduction. The story progresses logically through the chapters, and that has a good ending. And so you build this story, and you use your philatelic material to illustrate that story. So, exhibits, of course, can be in the frames, right? You can have a one frame exhibit or a multi-frame exhibit. But if you are just starting out, an easy way to start out is to start with a one-page exhibit where you tell a very small, limited story on just a page. But again, here, you can use many different types of philatelic elements. You don't necessarily have to be limited to stamps. So these are just a couple of examples I found online. This one tells a little story about thatched roofs and how they're constructed. And this one talks about bandstands, music bandstands. And you can see the variety of material that's on each page. So if you want to give it a try, the American Topical Association has a they do this, they've been doing this annually for the last few years. You can make a one-page A4 or letter size, or a double width, which I think is A3. But as long as it's one page, and you submit it, they put it online. They're not judged. They're just there for people to try their hand at it and share, and then you can see other pages that other people have made. If you have that competitive bug and you want to put something in to be judged, the British Topical or the British Thematic Association has a one-page virtual competition. I'm not sure if they run it every year or every couple of years, but here's a link that you can use to take a look at their website, and it has all the explanation of how they run their one-page competition. So the last couple of minutes, I just want to say that when you're browsing at a stamp show, also keep an open mind, because sometimes you don't I think a lot of the time you have a topic in mind or a theme in mind and you go and look for the material, but sometimes when you're browsing you might come across something that you don't understand or have not seen before, but it catches your interest, and that may ultimately lead to an interesting story. So sometimes, like I said, the story finds you. So, just personally, for me, I came across this postal stationery card, many years ago now, when I was browsing through some dealer stock, and it's a postcard from the Hospital for Sick Children. It's an internationally renowned pediatric hospital in Toronto. But it caught my attention because of these interesting illustrations on it. There's sort of before and after pictures of club feet, which was one of the things that the hospital treated back in the sort of late 1890s, early 1900s. And this led me down a whole rabbit hole of collecting these cards. There's many varieties of these cards, and there was a whole story that eventually revealed itself about how the hospital used these cards to thank donors who made contributions to their annual Christmas appeals, because the hospital was trying to raise money to provide treatment to all children in Ontario at the time. So that was a whole, and I have a one frame exhibit on that now. And it was something I didn't know anything about, but, picked up some of these cards and did some research and learned about them. Another one really interesting, which I'm sort of currently working on now, are these World War I tobacco reply cards. These were cards that were included in packages of cigarettes and tobacco that were sent to soldiers that were fighting overseas in World War I. There were all kinds of tobacco funds through newspapers or through, there was an overseas club in the UK, and they raised money, and people would donate money to send smokes to the soldiers that were fighting overseas, and the soldiers would get the parcel with the postcard. The name and address of the donor would be written on the card, and they would write a little message of thank you and mail the card back. So there's all varieties of these cards, and this is a whole fascinating story in itself, and I'm still kind of collecting and working on it, and building a social philately exhibit on that. So I gave a talk for the American Topical Association in January. You can find it on their website, about social philately, which is sort of telling social historical stories using philatelic material. So that's another way to kind of build a topical or thematic collection, is to kind of find these stories. And like I said, keep an open mind, because sometimes you come across something, and when you dig into a little more, there's a really interesting story behind it. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Thanks for listening.
We hope to see you at our next Stampex show, at Virtual Stampex, or in person in London. There are more Virtual Stampex talks coming to YouTube. You know what to do. Click subscribe now so you don't miss out. See you soon.